I want to welcome everybody here to our third Tuesday speaker series of Nuclear New York. My name is Keith Shue. I'm the co-executive director of Nuclear New York. Our other co-executive director is Scott Sikora. He can't be with us here tonight, but we have a great lineup for you this evening. I'll give you introductions in a little bit, but first, let me just tell you a little bit about who we are, Nuclear New York. We're an independent, nonprofit, 501c3 organization. Our goal is to advance a prosperous, decarbonized future while supporting nature conservation. We are scientists, we're engineers, we're environmentalists, we're social justice advocates. We're people from every political persuasion, but we agree on one thing, and that's that nuclear energy has to be part of our future. If we want to decarbonize, if we want to have abundant energy, that's going to be essential for New York to prosper in the 21st century. So we focus on research, we focus on public education, policy advocacy, and of course, thoughtful, non-intrusive engagement as we make the case for nuclear power. So, a little bit of background on some things that are going on right now. I think you all know, many of you know that New York is embarking upon a ambitious goal of increasing nuclear capacity, thanks to our governor. We have 3.4 gigawatts of existing nuclear capacity in the state today. She has made an announcement that we're going to add 5 gigawatts to have a 8.4 gigawatt nuclear reliability backbone to have a reliable grid. And there's actually been a case proceeding that's been initiated to start that process going. That's through the Public Service Commission. In parallel with that, the New York Power Authority is pursuing an additional 1 gigawatt of nuclear capacity, which would be the starting point of this. As part of that proceeding, which is now underway, NYSERDA and DPS, the Department of Public Service, they have announced publication of Advanced Nuclear Policy Options paper. That's getting a lot of eyes looking at it right now. And there's a comment period at play at the moment where Nuclear New York and folks from across the spectrum in New York are going to be commenting on that option paper and on a series of questions that the DPS is asking stakeholders as it relates to building out that backbone of nuclear. Comments for that are due September 24th, so we're working hard on trying to get those comments together. But there's something that everybody here can do right now to help us with that. The docket that's been started by the DPS is a docket that is open to parties who register to submit formal technical comments. It's also open to the general public. I'm not happy to say this, but there's a lot of anti-nuclear comments that have been submitted on the record by one organization in particular who has managed to get a lot of activists to submit form letter comments. So what we've done is we've created a mechanism for pro-nuclear folks to submit comments saying that you support it, that you're glad that the Public Service Commission is doing what it's doing in terms of creating a nuclear backbone. Here's our action alert. I hope everybody here can take action upon it. It's on our website. And you can get to our website very simply, nuclearnewyork.org. And if you click on the tabs on the top where it's action, you'll get to this page here. This is our action page, and it's pretty simple. You fill out your name, your email, your phone number, your address, and we have a set of topics you can pick from. And if you pick a topic, it'll give you a template letter that discusses that subject matter, which you can edit. We believe people should. We give credit to our members to think for themselves and to write for themselves, and so we give the ability to edit these things. And of course, you can also just submit your comments directly to the DPS. We certainly encourage that, and so we have a link to click on for that. So if you want to pick one of our template letters, it populates that field. You can edit it, and then you can click submit, and it goes off to the DPS. So I'm hoping everybody here can do that. I want to say one last thing before we get started with our speaker, and that is we have a great symposium coming up, the Nuclear Symposium 2026 in September, September 23rd and 24th. This year, it's going to be a two-day event. It's the first time we've done this, but the first day is going to be focused on New York, focused on the northeast part of our country, and focused especially on 8 communities within New York that have indicated that they're interested in having new nuclear development. So it's good. That's going to be pretty exciting. And then we also continue on to Thursday with a broader set of topics relating to nuclear energy. So. There's our website, nuclearsymposium.com. I encourage you to go there. I encourage you to come down to New York City and be part of it. So, with no further ado, I want to hand it over to Lavi Bahuguna. I believe I pronounced your name correctly. If I didn't, you will
Enough,
not tell.
Keith.
But but we're happy to have Ken and Brian here from the company Supercritical to talk to us about how uranium could actually be extracted from seawater, which create unlocks abundance for nuclear energy for the foreseeable future, and the unforeseeable future, I think. So anyway, with that, Lavi, why don't you take over? Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much, Keith. Hi, everyone. I'm Lovey. I work media and partnerships here at Nuclear New York. I know we're all super excited about today's topic. I'm sure many of us here already know who Cannon is. I just want to run a quick introduction because there's a lot here that I'm sure he wouldn't say himself. Cannon here has over 30 years of experience in finance. He's been the founder, officer, and director of several energy tech and critical metal sector companies, uh, many of which have also been listed on the public stock exchange in North America and been evaluated for over $1 billion. Today, Canon represents. Oops. Today, Canon is coming to us as the CEO of Super Critical Materials, a company that is developing a very exciting technology, working in the development and deployment of nuclear fuel infrastructure. Canon has also co founded Synthelene Energy, which is developing another low cost carbon neutral synthetic aviation fuel, and was also the co founder of Terrestrial Energy, which I'm sure we all know is a developer of advanced nuclear SMR technology. So, there's been consistent passion for advancing abundant, reliable, low cost energy solutions to address the global challenges that we're all familiar with here and working towards making energy more affordable. So take it away, Ken, and we're all very excited to tune in.
Thanks, Lavi. I appreciate that introduction. I appreciate the invitation to speak to you all today. I'm first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apologize a little bit because last night I developed a little bit of a sore throat, so I might my voice might sound a little froggy today, and I currently have a throat lozenge going on here, so I'll just apologize in advance. But yeah, it's great to be here. I support Nuclear New York. I love nuclear and I love New York. So I it follows logically that I would love this organization. I actually lived in New York for a brief period, for about 9 months, a long time ago. It was the greatest time of my life, and I think it's just an incredible part of the world and deserves to have the best energy source in the world. So I'm going to spend some time today just sort of expanding upon the introduction of myself, because I think that's an important part of the story of our company. I'm going to talk about the global nuclear fuel supply chain and the constraints that are embedded deeply within it. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the company itself and the technology and the project, Supercritical. So and then I believe we have time for Q&A, which I love, my favorite part. So yeah, just to expand upon what Lavi said about me, I am a 30 plus year veteran of the finance industry. I've been an entrepreneur for 22 years. Started multiple companies, and founded multiple companies, and I've taken 4 companies public on major North American stock exchanges during that time, and 3 of them have achieved a billion plus or multi-billion dollar valuations in the stock market. I've supported or led over $500 million in financing for my companies, and over $100 million of government grants, government grant funding, and over $1 billion of government loan guarantee. So I'm just going to briefly walk you through a little bit of the actual companies themselves. Lavi did reference a couple of them. I'm just going to talk about them in a little bit more detail because I think it paints a picture of how I and how we arrived at this moment today, and what's past is prologue. So yeah, my first company in 2004 I co-founded is called Uranium Energy Corp. It is now the largest uranium mining company in the US by far, listed on the New York Stock Exchange. By it's the largest by market cap and by reserves. Uh, uh, Second company I founded, this company which is now called NioCorp, is developing the largest undeveloped niobium deposit in the world outside of Brazil. And it's doing that in Nebraska, right in the heart of the country. They're building a mine just now there, and it is a pretty extraordinary project. I'm extremely proud to have my fingerprints on it. It is actually they just updated their feasibility study last week, and it is just an absolute leviathan of a project of critical metals, including niobium and scandium and many others, with over 37 billion in life of mine revenue and just over 4 billion in NPV. Just an extraordinary project. So very happy to be associated with that one. It's NB on the Nasdaq. They sometimes trade over $1 billion, sometimes not. But they're sort of right around that level. And as Lavi mentioned, I've co-founded a company called Terrestrial Energy, which I spent 13 years of my life focused on that. I was the CFO of the company, Chief Financial Officer. We founded in 2012, and we developed a leading SMR technology. I believe it's the best product on the market, on the global marketplace in terms of SMRs. And it's probably the only low-cost SMR, which is a very significant, is going to become a very significant factor in the global market for SMRs. Obviously, low-cost energy is the goal that we all want to achieve. So that company, we took it public last year on the Nasdaq, raised over $300 million, and the company achieved a market cap of $2.5 billion on day one. So it was a happy day, and it was a very good outcome for all of that, all those years of work. But I stepped down as CFO last of May, and ever since then I've been focused on this new project, Supercritical, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the global nuclear fuel supply chain. It is a very, very interesting and very little known commodity market for a commodity which is so crucially important for 10% of the world's electricity, 10% of the world's electric power fueled by nuclear. And a lot of people don't know how this particular commodity supply chain works. So in essence, we have a situation here where the supply is controlled by a highly concentrated and very small number of countries in the world, including Kazakhstan, Canada, Namibia, and Australia. You could add a couple others in there to sort of take you up to nearly 70% of total global supply, and those would be Uzbekistan and Niger. Now, you may notice something about these countries. They're not all of them sort of perceived as being particularly friendly places or allied nations of the United States. So, the U.S., on the other hand, is a country that has virtually no uranium production. It's got the largest nuclear reactor fleet in the world, with currently 95 reactors operating in the U.S. and with um, new ones which are or previously decommissioned reactors which are now being restarted. I'm going to go into the sort of the demand picture in a second here, but the point is, you know, the supply demand imbalance domestically in the United States is completely out of whack, right? Last year, 2025, the US, I believe they almost doubled their production from like the last 40-year average production of uranium. They produced 2 million pounds. That's great. You might say, oh, they doubled their production. No, just by doubling the production, all they achieved was producing, sort of less than 5% of their total reactor requirements, as opposed to, less than 1% of their total reactor requirements. So saying that the US produced 5% of its total reactor demand uh, is the same thing as saying that the US is totally dependent on other countries for over 95% of its total reactor demand. Now, that may not sound like a particularly wise strategy. And if that's what you're thinking, then I agree. And the fact that the country is beholden to countries like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, which are controlled by Moscow, and Niger, which had a military junta a couple of years ago and expropriated all of France's uranium mines. Uh, we're in a situation where we're creating uh, a real potential supply shock. And now the situation is, this is a more recent phenomenon which is happening in global markets. You've got countries that are um, expanding their nuclear fleets, like China and India, that are making big moves with some of these large national producers of uranium to lock in long-term supplies with these nations. So, for example, India, uh, they've said that they publicly stated that their mandate, their policy, is to expand their nuclear capacity from 9 gigawatts, which is what it is today, not much, to 100 gigawatts, which is a lot. That's almost equal to what the United States has today. And well, I mean, they don't have a whole lot of domestic uranium supply. So what the heck are they going to do to fuel those reactors? Well, they've been entering into these sort of long-term supply agreements with Kazakhstan and Australia and Canada. All all the sort of places where the uranium is supposed to come from for U.S. reactors. So we've got sort of a serious problem brewing here, and if we're not careful, we're going to find ourselves in a situation where the utility companies in the United States are struggling to find fuel to actually find fuel for their reactors. So, but here's the thing about uranium, which I find really fascinating, uh, and it's just so interesting from a business perspective. It is just about the most inelastic commodity, price inelastic commodity that you can think of. What does that mean? Well, it means that if the price of uranium goes way up, right? Like if it goes up 10x, it's about $87 a pound on the spot market. Well, if it were to go up 10x, the utility companies that operate these nuclear power plants, they can't just substitute some other commodity to replace the fuel, right? There's only one product they can use, and that's uranium. So um, it doesn't matter how much the price goes up because they really, really need it, there are no substitutes. And here's the other interesting thing: the other reason why there is so much price inelasticity is because uh, um, uranium, as it turns out, the raw material, is a very small part, almost a negligible part of the total cost of electricity generation, electric power generation. So those two factors together mean that if we were all of a sudden to find ourselves in a sudden supply shock, the price could skyrocket, and the demand would still be there. The utility companies would still be forced to buy it. So that's pretty interesting, especially if you're a company that produces uranium. So that's that's sort of the supply situation in a nutshell. I mean, demand wise, it is equally fascinating. You have uh, an international, a global market where 36 countries so far have pledged at the COP conferences to triple nuclear capacity in their respective countries by 2050. The U.S. itself has pledged to quadruple nuclear capacity. In other words, going from about 100 gigawatts to 400 gigawatts. Now that's a big move. That's a huge increase uh, in not a very long time. Yeah, and I mean the whole nuclear debate. I don't think I need to sell it to anybody on this call. I think everybody here is pretty much gets it. But um, you know the level of acceptance that has happened, the sentiment, the shift in sentiment which has happened really in the last, I would say, 2 years. It's been ongoing for maybe the last 6 years or so. Um, but really, in the last 2 years, it's accelerated quite dramatically. You've got governments supporting nuclear in a very big way. You've got new legislation supporting nuclear and nuclear technologies development. And you've got the largest companies in the world, the Bag Seven, if you will, that are placing big bets, multi-billion dollar bets into nuclear, both traditional and new technologies. So you've got like every important sector of the global economy that has put up their hand to say, we're okay with nuclear. We want nuclear. We need nuclear. It's really a matter of need. That's what's driving it. So the demand situation, I think, looks extremely, uh, the sky looks extremely blue. And so you've got these two forces that are happening simultaneously that, will serve to create um, a pretty significant increased need for uranium raw material. So there we go. There's the setup. Uh, this is now let's talk about the solution. We've talked about the problem. Now let's talk about the solution. Can everybody still see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So supercritical is first and foremost a nuclear fuels and critical metals security of supply company, right? Our focus as a company is to build infrastructure related to nuclear fuel and critical metals security of supply, domestic security of supply in the United States. That's our first goal. So, how do we do that? Well, our first project, as was mentioned in the preamble, uh, is using a rather old technology. It's not new. It's been around for maybe 50 years, but it's never been commercialized and it's never left the lab, basically. And the U.S. government worked on this technology for many years, almost 10 years, in the nuclear lab system, led by Pacific Northwest Nuclear Labs, and also Oak Ridge, and in collaboration with multiple universities, including MIT, the University of Texas, the University of Idaho, and others, and also scientific institutions like the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. And this big collaboration, they did all kinds of work on this technology to figure out if there was a there. Is this something which is uh, technically viable? Can we really extract uranium from seawater? Well, first of all, an interesting fact of nature is that there is uranium in the ocean. Well, you've got the entire periodic table in the ocean, but including uranium, and it is a very, very low concentration, right? But it is very homogeneous. It's homogeneously distributed all around the world's oceans. That's pretty cool. Why do I say that? Well, when you have and just a reminder to everybody here, I come from the uranium mining sector. That's where I got my roots. So I know a little bit, I know a thing or two about land-based uranium mining and other metals mining. I can tell you that the consistency of the grade is your biggest enemy as a mining company, because you can have a drill hole here and a drill hole here, and which is indicative of something that's in the middle, but you're never sure. You never know until you actually extract it out of the ground, right? So grade consistency is huge. We've got some background noise. Can someone please mute your line? Uh, so um, uh, so to have this gift of total homogeneity of the concentration of uranium in the world's oceans, though it may be very, very small, uh, is really a godsend. And it really helps to drive the whole process of extracting these metals from the sea. So basically, just quickly go through a little bit of the science. Um, so what the DOE collaboration did was they proved that they could use something very basic, a very basic material, acrylic fiber, kind of like what's on the end of your mop, and treat it with some chemistry, some not very exotic, not particularly exotic chemistry. Stick it in the water, just leave it there, and it would interface with enough seawater after 21 days to pull up a quite meaningful concentration of uranium adsorbed, adsorbed through ion exchange, like a trillion little microscopic ion exchanges in the water. The uranium mineral species in the ocean adsorbs to the fiber. So you pull up the fiber, you put it in another uh, chemical bath. The uranium and other metals are stripped off. The fibers are reused and redeployed again, and the cycle goes on until the end of time. So through this process, the DOE collaboration proved that yes, this in fact works. The chemistry works, and so they did a great thing in the sense that they they proved, I would say, over 90% of the chemistry of all the chemistry that needs to be done for this. We sort of walked into this tech with knowing that over 90% of the chemistry is proven. Now, on the flip side of that coin is the engineering. All right, now how do you deploy enough of this fiber into the sea to have enough interface with enough seawater to get enough to get industrial quantities of uranium? So that part of it, the engineering part, was sort of the inverse of the chemistry part, right? So whereas over 90% of the chemistry was proven by the DOE collaboration and is now known and patented, uh, uh, the the inverse is probably true for the engineering. Probably less than 10% of the engineering work was done. So that is why supercritical exists. I formed the company in 2024. We got an exclusive license to this patent, which is owned by the U.S. government, and um, our job, our function, is to take this proven technology out of the lab and design the industrial scale production facility. So, in other words, to do all of the engineering work. So, we started our engineering program in March 2025. So, it's been going on almost 18 months now. And well, we've learned a lot. We've done more engineering on this technology than anybody else in history. All right. So, we know more about the engineering uh, of this infrastructure than anybody in history. So that's a pretty cool thing. And what we're learning about this as we do this engineering work is that yes, this is indeed possible at industrial scale. We have an industrial scale design. We've got a concept image on the slide here. Well, it's a conceptual drawing. It's not exactly what it's going to look like, but it gives you sort of a hint. It sort of it'll tweak your imagination a little bit to think about what these facilities might look like. And but the other thing that we're doing is the cost engineering. So we're also while we're trying to figure out what an industrial scale facility might look like and how it would work, we're also trying to figure out what it would cost. Right? Can we do this economically? And the answer so far seems to be a resounding yes. All right. So we've got some good news there. I can't go into details right now about that because it's not public information. But in essence, we have impetus to carry on. We have the impetus to raise more capital, risk more capital on engineering risk, and carry this design forward through the normal first principles steps of bringing a large infrastructure project to commercial fruition. So we're going through, um, pilot testing in the Gulf. We're going to have a feasibility study, and we're going to we're seeking to achieve a final investment decision, and then go into construction and begin begin the commissioning and the operation of these industrial scale facilities. Our target commencement date would be 2031. That is an ambitious schedule, but we are all about moving quickly and with nimbleness and alacrity, and trying to get this essential technology um, into the market as quickly as we possibly can. We know that capital rewards swift action, right? So we want to demonstrate that, of course, and but it's also, it's good for the country, and it creates a competitive advantage for us because I know what it takes to put a uranium mine into production, and the sort of normal time frame for putting a land-based uranium mine into production is sort of on the range of 15 to 30 years. It's just an extraordinarily long process, with the permitting and engineering and everything else. So, if we can be in production in 5 years, well, that is a massive advantage. And it also, we want all those land-based mines to get into production too, of course. We need it all. But if we can get some production quickly, in the time when we really need it, in the time where there's a potential um, supply shortfall, well, that would just be so important for the domestic security of supply. And uh, the only other thing I'll say about this is the size of this facility that we've designed uh, is for approximately 1.9 million pounds of uranium per year. Uh, the facility is designed kind of like a hydro dam, so it's designed to last forever, basically. Like it'll probably produce uranium for 100 years or more. We actually don't know because it's sort of that forever infrastructure. Uh, so, but and just for context, 1.9 million pounds would be uh, roughly equal to the total annual production in the United States last year, which, as we said, actually doesn't amount to all that much. But let me put it in other terms. 1.9 million pounds per year is enough to power approximately 4 million homes. All right, so that will power 4 gigawatt years of um, of reactor electricity production every year. So, but here's the thing: if we can build our 1.9 million pound facility and we prove that it's um, technically and economically viable, and even economically robust, well, guess what? We can tap into capital markets to copy and paste that facility and build another one and another one and another one and another one. And there's really, no limit to how many of these facilities we can build. Why? Because there's no limit to how much uranium there is in the ocean. And there's virtually no limit to how much coastline there is, particularly in the Gulf. So we can and then we can go to other countries. This is, I think, a brilliant export opportunity for the United States. Um, of course, there are many other countries around the world that have civilian nuclear energy programs that do not have their own domestic supply of uranium, and but do have coastlines, right? So um, I think the sky is very blue on these kinds of alternative technologies, uh, and we're super excited to be bringing this infrastructure to the world and having a meaningful impact on the domestic security of supply of nuclear fuel. So I think I will cap it there for now and hand it back to the host and probably have some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Ken. That was incredible. I mean, you walked us through everything. We know the context, we know the technology. It's really exciting stuff, big numbers, big ambitions, as there should be. Um, I'm gonna take the next, maybe I don't want to take up too much time. I know there's a room full of people that's, they're brimming with questions, and I already see the chat having a bit of a discussion. So
Boy,
I'll ask a few questions, and this is time for the audience now to just, put in the questions in the chat, and after the next 15-20 minutes, we're gonna go all in with the public questions. But thank you so much. I hope your cough is doing okay. I know that was a
so far so
lot.
good. Voice is starting to run out on me here, but I think I have enough left in me to finish the session.
Oh boy, we're grateful for that. I want to quickly jump in and talk about the fact that this is an unconventional full resource, and we've had a lot of conversations even here in these third Tuesday speaker series. We've had people come in who are from the fuel recycling world, from other extractions. Do you
Mhm.
see that as a direct competition for supercritical, or is that just part of the overall supply chain?
Yes and no. So, in terms of fuel alternatives, yes, you have fuel recycling. Pretty familiar with the economics of fuel recycling. They've been doing it in France for over 40 years, and it is not competitive with primary raw material mining. So, I think there are other good policy reasons for doing recycling of nuclear spent nuclear fuel, and France has clearly made that just part of their cycle, and it's all funded. It's funded by government. If you wanted to make it into a commercial business, I don't think that would be successful. Not at the current uranium prices. So yes, if uranium price tripled from where it is today, okay, maybe you could have a viable business doing fuel recycling. But uh, yeah, I think the real answer is I'd love to see it all. I mean, we need it all, right? We need so much nuclear fuel. People don't realize, we sort of need to uh, probably 1,000x our nuclear fuel supply from where it is
Mhm.
today. So, that's going to take, it's either going to take thousands of mines or it's going to take some kind of alternatives and
Yeah.
alternative fuels like thorium fuel, for example. I see my excellent friend John Kutch is one of the guests here. He can talk your ear off about thorium. Uh, but yeah, I think we need it all, and so
Yeah.
I welcome all of this competition.
hmm Well, speaking of financial viability, and you yourself have said that in the last 2 years, nuclear has seen a certain kind of resurgence. I'd love to hear a little bit about how a business model like yours can withstand the volatility of uranium prices, considering that you're seeing 2030, 31 as first production timeline.
Well, as a company, philosophically, we take a long-term bullish view of uranium. So everything that I've just talked about, we believe that as a company that there is a supply-demand situation in front of us that will lead to increased uranium prices and also a kind of a stability of uranium prices. Now, but here's the thing that I got to tell you. If we are successful in doing what we're seeking to do here, um, what it in fact means is that there will be a cap on the cost of nuclear fuel the world over. So there will be an unlimited supply of nuclear fuel, and there will be a cap on what it costs for that unlimited supply of nuclear fuel. All right. So what you're doing is you're effectively turning nuclear energy into a renewable resource, right? Because you have unlimited fuel, and um, you are creating an energy cost base that is not subject to volatility because the cost is always the same and it will always stay the same forevermore. And that I can't begin to tell you what kind of ripples that has through the global economic system. When you have an energy source that has a beta of one, you can't even imagine all the little things that that impacts throughout the entire global economy. Um, it's just almost impossible to imagine. So, at some point when we're up and running and we've proven this and we're, copy pasting this 100, 1,000 times, what we're going to find is that we're going to have a really an irreversible and exceedingly benevolent effect on the global energy system that is going to ripple throughout the entire global system.
That is very fascinating, and I'm sure that that's opened up a few more questions from our audience here, if that's something that they'd like to dive into. Um, I'd love to hear about. I mean, on this side of things, I'm going to use the buzzwords that everybody loves in this nuclear world: AI and data
Mhm,
centers. We
mhm.
see a lot of that conversation over here in relation to like energy production. How
Mhm.
much of that do you think is explicitly, driving demand um, in terms of the fuel?
Well, it hasn't seemed to drive it yet, but there is zero doubt that it will, because as I mentioned earlier, the largest companies in the world use a lot of energy and are uh, projecting to use a lot more energy, and more they are looking towards nuclear energy to provide to be the source of that energy. And okay, so that is all just beginning to happen, and it's accelerating. So, but no one has yet thought about the fuel implications, right? So you can have all the nuclear you want, but if you don't have fuel, that nuclear is not going to operate. So it's really it's a critical element that is sort of unfortunately it tends to be an afterthought, for a lot of the. I mean, if you were the chief procurement officer of NVIDIA or Meta, you're not thinking about nuclear fuel, right? It's just not something that factors into the thought process. So that's why companies like mine exist, right? We're here to think about that layer of the global infrastructure, right? So now I happen to, so I think that everybody here probably knows that data centers are starting to become a little bit maligned. People are starting to take a bit of a negative view or a NIMBYist view towards AI and data centers. I don't agree with that view. I think that AI will provide uh, a societal good that is beyond, virtually beyond what any of us can possibly imagine. I'm an optimist, as you can tell. So I really think it's going to be just a huge boon for human civilization. That's my view. You can disagree with that view, but I don't think you can disagree with the fact that this AI supercompute is on a trajectory, and the forward progress of man and the forward progress of technology is a force that you can't stop. No matter what you do, you can put up all of the you know chain link fences and signposts and placards you want to, but you cannot stop the progress of technology. It's impossible. So I think we're on an inevitable course. I think it will be. I think it'll have a happy ending for everybody, but all of that has to be powered by something, right? And we're going to need it all. We're going to need SMRs. We're going to need large traditional reactors. We're going to need fusion. We're going to need, yes, unfortunately, some natural gas too. We're going to need it all. So, we can't sort of be cherry picking uh, different types of energy that we think we like and don't like. We just have to build as much as we can, as quickly as we can, and just try to keep up, basically.
Wonderful. I maybe ask you one more question before handing it off to the audience, who I know are itching to ask more, a little bit more about, the technology, the permitting process, and such. I do want to, put you in a state where this technology, decades from now, has succeeded. How do you see this changing what it means for the US, what it means for energy dependence, and the whole landscape?
Oh, great question. So, as I explained at the beginning of my remarks, the U.S. is highly, highly dependent on other countries for its nuclear fuel supply, right? Just last year, the U.S. doubled its uh, domestic production, and it's now sort of producing somewhere under 5%, which means it's totally dependent on over 95%. Well, with this technology and deploying the attendant infrastructure, uh, and you know, given the fact that it is that we believe it will be highly reproducible, right? So it'll be almost modularized in a way, and you can just copy paste as much as you want. And every time you hit the paste button, you're getting 2 million pounds per year of annual production. So, I mean, I think uh, that this technology has provided the opportunity for the United States to go from a country that is dependent on over 95% on other countries for over 95% of its nuclear fuel supply to becoming a nation which is a net exporter of nuclear fuel, right? So we're producing the kind of supplies of nuclear fuel that is more than we can use ourselves as a nation, and that we can export it to other countries. And why wouldn't we want to do that? Why wouldn't the United States want to know and have some level of control of what other countries are getting nuclear fuel and where it's coming from? It's coming from our shores, and we're sending it to the countries that you know that that are our allies, that deserve it, that are not rogue states. So I think that is a very reasonable outlook for this technology, and a very plausible future, and in the not too distant future. So maybe 20 years from now, maybe less, the United States could very plausibly become a net exporter, a net exporting nation of nuclear fuel.
Okay, very exciting. I'm sure all of us here, would support a vision like that. I would love to hand over the mic now to Eric or Keith to moderate the public Q&A part of this. And I'm sure at this stage we are comfortable with people unmuting and asking questions if they want to, but I would let Eric and Keith, or Keith,
Yeah, I
make
think
that
Eric
known.
would be great at this. I think that he has joined us now, so why don't we ask him to weigh in?
Hi, I'm Eric with Nuclear New York. I'm sorry it's a little dark. I'm conserving electricity until we build more nuclear, just as a kind of protest here. But um, we got a few questions in the chat. One question I have is just from a kind of economic and investment point of view, what is the tightest bottleneck for the nuclear fuel cycle right now? And would you argue that that's also the tightest bottleneck for AI broadly right now? Would you talk about uranium mining production or enrichment or actual electricity generation, or what do you think?
Good question. I think uh, there's two parts to that question. I'll answer both in sequence. So you've got the nuclear fuel cycle. It sort of consists of 19 individual stages to make traditional fuel. All right, the advanced reactor systems that are currently being commercialized, they have somewhat shorter supply chains with fewer steps. But in essence, I think um, the raw material part of the supply chain. I mean, it's not like there's a shortage of uranium. There is plenty of uranium in the ground. We know where it is, and but there are other constraints to it, right? If we could just dig it all up and divide it equally amongst all the nations that need it, okay, that would be great. And if we could do that immediately, but that's not the situation we're in. The uranium supplies globally are very geopolitically constrained, and they are also uh, bureaucratically and regulatorily constrained. All right. So if you want to put a new land-based uranium mine into production, like I was explaining earlier, you've got maybe a 15 to 30 year life cycle from discovery to production, to first production. That's huge. Like imagine the kind of capital patience, the patience of capital that you would need to stay in a story that long, for that long an investment horizon. So, the constraints create other constraints and so on. So, but in addition to raw material, just strictly from a capacity perspective, uranium conversion, I think, is very, very constrained, particularly in the United States. That's where you take uranium raw material, which is uranium oxide, and convert it into a fluoride, uranium UF6, uranium hexafluoride, which is a gas which you need. It's one of the steps in the process to ultimately make enriched nuclear fuel. Conversion is very, very constrained. There are a couple of companies now that are seeking to build new capacity of uranium conversion, UF6 production capacity in the United States. I think those companies are super, super interesting. I'm following them closely. Um, so, but and then everybody talks about enrichment, and that's where you concentrate the level of uranium 235 isotope in the fuel mix to higher levels. That's very constrained. Domestically, the United States does not have operating capacity sufficient to meet the demands for enrichment of fuel at this moment. But that's also expanding. The government is providing an awful lot of funding for that, as is the private sector. So I think that's sort of on a good trajectory. But as it sits today, it is deficient. It is supply chain constrained. So, and then you've got the back end of the cycle, right? So you, I think most reasonable people can agree that if you want to have a robust nuclear energy industry, you need to have a long-term plan for the waste. All right, we do not have that in the United States today, right? We've got spent nuclear fuel sitting in the parking lot of nuclear power plants. That is not a long-term strategy. So um, we know what the answers are for the long-term disposal, conditioning, and storage of nuclear fuel, spent nuclear fuel is. We just need to deploy the capital, deploy the infrastructure, and put it into effect. All right. So those are the that's my idea of the constraints within the nuclear fuel cycle. Now, you also asked me about the supply chains for AI and data centers. Well, of course, they have a bit of a different supply chain. Yes, they're going to require nuclear fuel, and that's part of it. But they also require all sorts of supply chain um, uh, elements, whether they be raw materials or fab capacity or processing capacity, all sorts of things. And well, here's the big secret that not everybody tells you. Almost all of that, all supply chain capacity lives in China and Taiwan, is controlled by China and Taiwan and other countries. Um, so that's not great either, right? So one of the things I didn't talk about in my presentation is that, as a company, uh, supercritical, yes, we're seeking to extract uranium from seawater, but we're also working we're also working on other solutions for other parts of uh, big infrastructure supply chains that are very tightly constrained in the United States. And we're going to seek to provide solutions for those as well. And that includes, again, raw materials like rare earth elements, for example, and other critical metals. We want to have a healthy, robust supply of those raw materials, but we also need to have downstream value accretion to those raw materials, because if you're just mining those raw materials by themselves, it's not a profitable business. You have to, in fact, make something. You have to make something that goes into the supply chain. So um, you'll hear more about this later in the months and years ahead as we progress as a company. We'll focus on our first technology first, but then our goal, our aspiration long term, very much is to become invested in and in these other supply chain elements and developing that infrastructure as well. So yeah, that's also a very, very serious problem, right? So if China and Taiwan all of a sudden decided, sorry, we're cutting off all your supplies of pick a metal, praseodymium, um, it's game over for for the compute industry in the United States. So there you go. I mean, it's a supply chain is a huge, huge, huge issue that's very underlooked, and that's why we exist as a company, right? Not just nuclear fuel supply chains, but also other critical metals and essential supply chains. Good question.
Great answer. Well, here, I'll go through what we have in the chat. Some of these are very specific technical ones, so we'll try to knock them out. First one I see, you mentioned 50 million pounds of uranium per year required. Is that worldwide or just for the US?
No, that's the United States. It's around 45 to 50 million a year. Yeah,
Wow, that's a lot.
it's a lot. Yeah.
Um, Another couple questions. What is your TRL estimate? I think that's technology readiness level as far as a nascent industry versus mature one. And a related question, your technology has clearly proven it can extract uranium from seawater, but what is your independently validated all-in projected cost per pound of uranium oxide at commercial scale, including fiber replacement, marine deployment, recovery processing, logistics?
Right. I'll answer the first question first because it's pretty easy. Well, not easy, but TRL in my mind is kind of well, it's very subjective actually. And I find that when you have a technology that you're deploying at industrial scale, you sort of the parts of it that have a higher TRL and then parts of it that may have a lower TRL. Uh, and it's sort of difficult to come up with like a blended number. But I think what I would say, given the massive amount of work and investment that's gone into it from the DOE collaboration during the 2010s, that they probably achieved a TRL of probably about 6 or 7, maybe somewhere between 6 and 7. They did pilot projects. They produced uranium successfully in these pilot tests. They did a lot of oceanographic work, and as I said, they did a lot of chemistry and to truly understand how this works. And then, but of course, the part that hasn't been done is, as I said, the engineering of the industrial scale design. We are doing that now. We've done a lot of work on that so far already. We've got a lot more to do. So I would put our work on that end of things maybe at a slightly lower level, but I think overall, I think I can safely say between 6 and 7 right now. We're going to do a couple of pilots as part of our feasibility study. So we're going to deploy testing facilities in the Gulf, and we're going to be extracting actual uranium. That's going to start next year, actually, in the spirit of capital rewarding swift action. We're going to be deploying our test facilities as quickly as we can. We have we've got permitted facilities that we have access to, and so on and so on. This is all part of the TRL question. So yeah, I'm gonna go out there and say we're somewhere between 6 and 7. But I think we're gonna be at 8 very soon, maybe before the end of next year, and then obviously that's when we get into the construction of our industrial scale facility, and that takes you to TRL 9. Now, to answer your second question,
Is that the
um,
cost of
yes,
triuranium octoxide?
yes. So we have we've been doing uh, project project economics, yes, with an independent, large and reputable engineering firm. Now, we have not disclosed that economic information publicly, and I'm not allowed to disclose it to you here today. All I can say is, as I said before, we're finding the results to be tremendously promising, and it is giving us impetus to keep going and to do more work. So I think that's about all I'm allowed to say, unfortunately. Stay tuned. We're going to have some great disclosures coming up about this in the not too distant future.
Oh, we will. We will. All right, let's go to the next one. Is there something regionally specific about uranium extraction from seawater? Can you do it in any part of the ocean? And also related, are they doing this in China as well?
All right. So first part of the question, technically, yes. As I said earlier, the uranium is homogeneously distributed throughout the world's oceans. So it's the same in Arctic Ocean as it is in the Indian Ocean. But what is different is the recoveries or the recoverability of the uranium based on different oceanic conditions. All right. So the and this is part of the work that was done by the DOE collaboration and Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute and others and MIT. They found out that the warmer the water, the higher the recoverability. Right. So that's why we're choosing the Gulf because they are warm waters. A lot of the testing work that was previously done was done, in the Bay of Squim in Washington State, which is pretty frigid water, right? And they were able to produce uranium for that water, but they found that if you go to much warmer waters, the recoverability increases actually very dramatically by a factor of 50% and even more than that. So it's a pretty extraordinary difference. So obviously, those are going to be the places where we're going first that have the right conditions for high recoverability, as demonstrated by the work that was done by the DOE collaboration. What was the second part? Was there a second part, or was that the second part?
Follow-up question is China also using this technology?
China is developing a uranium extraction from seawater technology. It is a fundamentally different technology. They're not using fiber. They're using something called MOFs. Don't ask me. It's MOFs. Don't ask me what that stands for. I can't remember. But it is. We've looked at it deeply, and our own view is that it is an inferior technology, and that they will not be successful commercially.
All right, good news. Next question is, I think about the kind of supply-demand match between new nuclear reactors coming online with the amount of uranium being produced. So is one supply growing faster than the other?
I think the notional demand. So new reactors that are being built and orders which are being placed. For example, China is building 33. They have 33 reactors under construction today. Right? They have no domestic uranium of their own. So, and clearly, we're not building 33 nuclear reactors, large reactors worth of nuclear fuel in land-based mines at this moment, and that's not happening. So, yes, I would say that the demand is outstripping, or the notional demand is outstripping the supply for uranium at this time. So we need to catch up. Yes, there's definitely, we're on track for a big shortfall. So that's why we need this solution. We need to deploy something quickly so that we can meet those demands in time before there's a crunch. And we don't want that. We don't want there to be interruptions in energy supply or, unusual cost spikes or in the electricity prices or anything like that. We don't want that. We want to avoid that. So yeah, it's a good question, and the solution is deploy more technologies like this.
We've got to build more.
Yes.
Next question from Gary. Has your company Supercritical reached break-even point where the energy required to extract uranium from seawater is less than the energy that can be obtained from the uranium in a reactor? And second part, does your company use covalent organic frameworks?
Okay, so I'll do the second bit first. That's related to the COPs are related to the MOFs, right? So those are the technologies that China is experimenting with today. We have nothing to do with that. We don't think it's a viable technology at industrial scale or on a cost competitive basis. So we made the specific corporate decision to not pursue those technologies. So to answer the first part of the question, I sort of have mixed feelings about EOI, or energy return on an energy invested. I think what really matters is producing low cost energy. I mean, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. So if you can produce low cost energy, then you're succeeding. But nevertheless, I can say that our design for our industrial scale facility it uses very, very little energy, right? It's designed that way on purpose because the scale is so huge. If there were any kind of aspect of the production process that required energy, the economics of the whole thing would just break down. It wouldn't work. So we've specifically designed it to use as little energy as possible, right? So yeah, I would say, I mean, I don't know what the energy return on energy invested of our processes in terms of making electric power, but I would suggest to you that it's probably um, much, much better than break even. I mean,
Uh,
nuclear energy is already the best scoring energy source on the energy return on energy invested uh, um, scale, right? Solar is like the lowest, nuclear is the highest. So the fact that we can produce nuclear fuel for an already, very high energy return energy source, I think that's pretty indicative that we're way better than break even.
um, is the ratio of uranium-235 to uranium-238 in the ocean similar to what is on land?
Yes, it's kind of like a universal constant.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a question, and you don't have to get into it. It's a little off topic, but do you have any thoughts on nuclear fusion?
Uh, yes, of course I do. Um, Basically, I love fusion. I'm all for it. Uh, if if you know if they came up with a commercial fusion plant tomorrow that was generating low cost electricity at massive industrial scale, there is nobody that would be happier on this planet than me. Um, we need it all. I'm happy for all of it. Now, that being said, I am extremely dubious about the claims that are being made or the claims that are being perceived by markets and by the general public about these fusion companies that are developing new technologies today. There are some kind of outrageous claims that are being made, and I don't think that's particularly helpful uh, for fusion. I think fusion is a great story. They have the capability of delivering game-changing energy technology to the world. They don't need to play games, right? They should just provide the straight goods, tell the story as it is, and uh, let the chips fall where they may. So, but yeah, I'm very, very hopeful that we have broad scale deployment of fusion globally very, very soon. I'm not too confident that that's going to happen, basically.
We had a question about the U.S. government support.
Mhm.
And I had a more specific one. Obviously, we're referring to uranium as a critical mineral. Your company is called Supercritical, but uranium was not on the U.S. Geological Survey's
It
official
is
list
now.
right, until last year. Could you
Yeah.
explain why that took so long? Why did it have to wait until last year? And did you have a part in that, or what are your feelings on that?
I wish. No, I cannot. I cannot explain why. Sorry.
Oh, all right. That was easy. Um, okay, what is the greatest engineering challenge you're expecting to face at your new at those test facilities? Is the question.
At the test facilities? Well, I mean, the testing is a relatively easy thing. Testing is all about collecting massive amounts of data. We have test protocols. We have a testing platform. We've got the permitting, so it's really just a matter of deployment and making sure we have all of the right instrumentation and so forth. So the if the, I think I'm going to like repurpose that question a little bit and ask, well, what is the most difficult engineering challenge that we face for industrial scale deployment? And that is a very simple answer, and that is how do we interface our fiber with enough seawater to collect the requisite amount of uranium um, to comprise something approaching industrial scale levels of production because it's a lot of water, right? The concentration, as I said, very, very, very low. So we have to get our fiber to somehow interface with, I think it's like 63 cubic miles of seawater or something in a year. All right. So actually, when you sort of boil it down to those numbers, it really doesn't seem that bad, especially when you have currents and things. But that is the real challenge. Like, how do you get your fibers to interface with that much volume of seawater in a given amount of time? So that is why we have an engineering program and why we have brilliant design engineers that are working on uh, the answer to exactly that engineering problem. And it's an engineering problem. It's not, some great mystery of the universe. It's an engineering problem like any other, and we will solve it. We are solving it.
We had a question about kind of a hyped up issue is plastic pollution in the ocean. So
Mhm.
regarding your technology, are the acrylic fibers made of PMMA plastic or another material? How do they absorb the uranium? And is there a concern regarding plastic nature of fibers and shedding in the ocean potentially?
Not that I'm aware of. The fibers are made of acrylic. They're not made of plastic. There's no shedding that I'm aware of, and I'm quite familiar with the Great Pacific Trash Vortex, for example, and um, the problems that's created for the entire food chain. So obviously, we, I'm not going to have anything to do with anything that's contributed to that problem. So no, the beauty of this technology, well, amongst its many other positive attributes, is that it leaves no ecological impact, right? And the work that was done by the DOE collaboration proved this, right? We deploy the chemistry is not does not have any impact on the ecosystem. Certainly the fibers don't. So we're uh, I think we're on terra firma in terms of if I can use a reverse pun uh, with respect to this technology because it's already been proven to be uh, ecologically benign. And you can't say the same thing about land-based uranium mining, of course, right? There's and that's one of the reasons why it takes so long to get a land-based uranium mine permitted because there's all kinds of environmental impact, right? And they have to work out all sorts of ways to avoid having that impact and get permits for things that they do that do have impact. So yeah, it's very different from land-based mining in that respect.
Speaking of land-based mining, we had a question, I think, about the long-term economic trajectory is basically now land mining for uranium is naturally cheaper than seawater extraction, but at some point will there be an inflection point where those reverse and seawater becomes the dominant form of uranium extraction?
I want to clarify that point because uh, what you have a situation now where existing production might be cheaper than uh, so existing land-based production might be lower cost than sea-based production. Not all of it, in fact, but yeah, a lot of it. But these mines don't last forever. They're not endless um, channels into the core of the earth, right? These are finite uh, reserves. They have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And even the world's largest producer of uranium, Cameco, stated in their last quarterly report that their existing mines, the largest mines in the world, they're due to run out of reserves like 10 years from now, right?
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so uh, the question that you really want to be asking is what is the marginal cost of new production and how does that compare to the sea-based mining method? All right, because when you have new production, you've got new capital deployment, right? You have to raise capital and deploy that capital and build capital um, uh, production infrastructure. And that here's an example. There's a new mine being built in Saskatchewan right now, one of the most high quality reserves in the world. and it's going to cost $2.2 billion to build it. Okay. Well, 2.2 billion Canadian. So let's say 1.6 billion US, right? So now there's a bunch of great analysis that's been done by some of the largest banks in the world, including Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs, talking about looking at the uranium sector and analyzing what uranium price would be required to motivate investors to fund new capital development in the uranium mining space, right? And those numbers are over $100 a pound. In other words, higher than the price we have today. All right. So the real question you need to ask yourself is, what is the cost of new marginal production of uranium? And how does that compare to sea-based money? And in that, we believe we have a big advantage. Yes.
Interesting. Let's see. I think we just got a couple more. I don't know if this needs to be more specific, but have you started to pursue offtake contracts?
I can't say, not allowed to say.
Okay, fair.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned to this channel. You'll see some news about that in the coming months.
You mentioned also briefly thorium. Does that play into the long-term trajectory of the supply constraints of uranium and looking for a substitute, or is this something that in a kind of long-term post-scarcity era that you were referring to, that plutonium and thorium will just naturally be part of the overall fuel cycle globally?
I think it has to be. I mean, no matter how much we produce, it's never going to be enough, right? So we need to have all the alternatives. Now, thorium might be a great fuel, but there's no thorium fuel supply chain that exists right now. So that infrastructure all has to come into place, and that means capital development, and it means permitting and fuel qualification, all that stuff. So I think we'll get there. I think the world will finally realize one day that, hey, we really need this. And I mentioned him earlier. I don't know if he's still on the call. My excellent friend John Kutch is developing a national thorium fuel storage facility in the United States. So we'll have plenty of raw material that's stored there and available as a stockpile. Oh, there, John is still here. He just gave me a party party toy.
And we at Nuclear New York are essentially advocates of nuclear energy. And do you think that the story that you articulated should be maybe more of a central focus of our message, that nuclear shouldn't be thought of as, against renewables, but if anything, it should be seen as a renewable itself in the long term, considering
It is
seawater
renewable.
extraction and yeah,
It is renewable.
but some of us even say
Like
it's more renewable than renewables compared
it
to
is more
solar and
renewable than
wind.
renewables. It
Yeah.
is more renewable, and also it's on all the time, and not dependent on the weather. So yeah, it is renewable, and nobody with a straight face can make an argument contradicting that fact.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great. I think I'm out of questions on the chat. So I think I'm going to hand it back to Lovey. But thank you so much for your generous time and information.
Thank you, Eric, for joining us for the darkness. Thank you, Ken, for soldiering on in spite of your sickness, and everyone else for joining us today. This has been a very exciting conversation. A recording of this will be available later, hopefully by tomorrow. And make sure to follow us on our socials and everything. I fully am grateful for everyone's presence here. And that's it. I don't think we have any more final thoughts. Thank you so much, everyone.